Hey, I'm strummerdood or mad or whatever, I don't know. So I made that video on why plot matters in games. You should totally go watch it. And in it, I mentioned League of Legends. Now, people often refer to multiplayer games like MOBAs as examples of narrative being irrelevant in some games. Sure, if looking at story in a traditional sense, but I mentioned League of Legends for a reason, because it not only tells a story, but one worth examining. So let's examine it. It seems as though people have a preconceived notion of what makes up a story. It's gotta have dialogue and cutscenes and characters dying and bitches crying, and my personal favorite, endless amounts of exposition to explain away all of the tropes. I mean, can you imagine how unbelievable Assassin's Creed would be if they didn't include the modern day meta story? You know, the same game where you jump from a top tall building safely into crates of hay? Yeah, League of Legends actually has a fair amount of backstory attributed to the champions in the continent of Valoran. We have cities and nations and alliances and rivalries and familial connections. I mean, not so much the last one, because how you gonna be brothers if you don't make a bitch bleed, you know what I'm saying? But when you load into Summoner's Rift for a game, nearly all of that backstory becomes null. What's left is a champion with some mannerisms and a few spells. Just because Thresh has Lucian's wife hostage in his lantern doesn't mean the ADC is going to refuse to grab it for a safe escape. The player really doesn't consider that Ashe has to kill her husband, Tryndamere. And Darius, he couldn't care less that he has to kill Draven, cause he's adopted or something, I don't know. It seems like plot doesn't matter, but that's because we're viewing matches from the champion's perspective and not the player's perspective. It's different. Most games employ a second-person point of view. Essentially, the player and the character have parallel motivations. But recent games like the Stanley Parable experiment with separating the two viewpoints with passive and active decision-making, creating conflict in the relationship. Leagues works in a similar manner in that the lore establishes summoners, or the player, use champions as passive tools. Maybe Lucian does question whether or not to use Thresh's lamp, and maybe it does pain Ashe to kill her dickhead husband. Internal conflict, though not discernible, can still exist. And hey, there's something to be said about a champion's personality. God knows I love my fiddles diddle. But the character that really drives a League of Legends match is the Trick 2G wannabe in the jungle. It's the raging ADC bot and the pretentious smurf mid. It's the incessant douchebag that keeps saying GG every 2 minutes. Just stop saying GG. It's embarrassing. Like, I feel bad for you. Stop. Yep. Even champs like Thresh, who have presence in lane, they're still dependent on how the player uses them.
That wasn't smart.
What's more important, that the enemy team picked Fizz, or that you have an AFK on your team? I mean, think about the League Championship Series. You don't root for Tristana to succeed. Everyone picks her now, and she's an asshole. No, you root for your favorite pro player because they're the ones making the plays. Also, shout out to my main boy man, for the MVP son. That's what's up. Like a spectator sport, a story emerges as time goes on since players are constantly making decisions. Sometimes teammates become antagonistic. Sometimes the smallest mistakes lead to the biggest plays. And sometimes people get into crazy arguments about their mental stability and stuff gets out of hand and the police has to intervene. That's some real ass conflict. What's remarkable is how Riot plots its story in comparison to others. In something linear and structured like The Last of Us, the designers have the daunting task of carefully, painstakingly plotting the events of a story to their greatest effect. In the like Too Good open world games, the designers allow players to pace their own consumption of major and minor quests towards a story's conclusion. And in a multiplayer title, the mechanics need to work in such a way as to give the player the agency of authorship. They create the story of every game. In Leagues' case, risk increases as time goes on. Kills and objectives give more gold, respawn timers increase, and of course, you have to work more and more as a team. Like a well-told story, the game can twist on a dime because of previous choices made by the player. Hell, you've got a theme too. Teamwork makes the dream work. Writer Tom Bissell, in a New Yorker interview, questioned whether video games were meant to tell story. He felt the strength of the medium instead came from the input and output relationship between the player and the mechanics. With League of Legends, though, the relationship leads to emerging reactive narrative, which is neat. And hey, if you want any more proof, just think of when you go up to your friend and you say, boy howdy, do I have a story for you? And you tell him about that 4v5 game you won with your main man Fiddles Diddle, which totally happened, except you weren't filming. But it seriously happened. Teamwork, it made the dream work, you know, it really did. Please believe me that it happened.